Thank you. Hi, everyone. I was delighted to be invited to Vermont because I love Vermont. I live in the Boston area, and Jobs for the Future is based in Boston. Can everyone hear me, or should I be behind the? Is this even on? It's not even on. Okay. Well, good enough. Can everyone hear me back there? Okay. Good. So yeah, I was happy to be invited to Vermont in the fall, and I look forward to seeing Vermont tomorrow on my way back down, because I was I saw, like, I was in torrential rain with fog, but occasionally the rain would slow down and I could see there was some nice foliage. So tomorrow will be hopefully not as rainy. So as Michelle said, I'm with Jobs for the Future, and let me just say that a little bit about my background. So I work with a lot of right now with Jobs for the Future, I work with a lot of community colleges around the country that are looking at doing exactly what you're thinking about doing, is trying to develop career pathways. So I love the phrases that Matt used. Their career pathways are about focused participation in post-secondary education, secondary and post-secondary education, and meaningful access to jobs that pay a family's sustaining wage. And so that's what I do with community colleges around the country, but also work with colleagues who do a lot of that career pathway development work at the high school level. And so I'm going to talk with you about both of those areas and about how one flows into the other. And I also just want you to know that prior to working with Jobs for the Future, I did a lot of work with WIBs. I'm very familiar with WIBs. I've worked in the WIA system way back when, for the city of Boston. So I sort of know the world that you're in, and I'm familiar with WIOA. So I just want you to know, what you're trying to do is so important and significant. And, the work you do is really critical. And I was pleased to hear, from Michelle and Matt's introductions, I got the impression that you are very much focused on this notion of focused participation and access to employment, meaningful employment opportunities, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So that's great and very admirable. Let me, wait, who told me how to do this?
I did. The little,
and how do I do it again? It doesn't look on. There are my arrows. Okay. Thanks. A little bit about Jobs for the Future. We are, work very much in the space that you are working in. We are focused on ensuring that there is opportunity to meaningful education and economic opportunity for everyone. We do that by working with educational systems, workforce investment organizations, state and federal government, to create programs at the local level, and then to scale those programs and develop systems to support the programs that have shown that, through evidence, through research, have really shown that they are effective, more effective than our traditional systems in ensuring that people earn credentials that have value in the labor market. Why do we do this? So Matt made it pretty clear with his numbers, and I'll just sort of reinforce some of them, that what this bar chart is showing you, everything in blue is everything that is above a high school diploma. So not necessarily degrees after high school, but some kind of further training after high school. So they're, oops, sorry, getting used to my little clicker here. So there we go. So this is 1973. I don't know if you can see that. And in 2020, and this is research that was done by the Georgetown University Center on Education in the Workforce. They are predicting that by 2020, 65% of jobs this is national, 65% of jobs will require something beyond a high school diploma. And I think that there's a lot written in that way. I think we're kind of familiar with the growing pace of the need for some post-secondary work. This is just another way to put that in simplified terms. So pay attention to this. 30% some college or an AA, and 35% a BA. And now we're going to compare that to, we were going to compare it to Vermont, but I have a different slide first. I'm just going to go to my Vermont slide first, and then I'm going to come back. So, all right, so Vermont is pretty interesting by certain numbers. You have 36% of, so you're over the national average when it comes to people with bachelor's degrees or professional degrees. There are 26.9% of people in the, that some college or an associate's degree band. And that was the band that from the other slide, the slide before, was 35% prediction for a need for 2020. And you've got a lot of people with, and you have 36% of people with a high school diploma or less. So these numbers don't look so bad. But you also have to realize, you have to think about the fact that, that occupations matter too. And one thing that this article from CNN Money kind of demonstrates is that depending on what your training is, someone with 43% actually of young workers that were part of this study with licenses or certificates were earning more than people with an associate's degree. And 27% were earning more than people with a bachelor's degree. And 31% of people with an associate's were earning more than a bachelor's. Now that doesn't track to kind of what we typically think of as the kind of wage opportunities with successively higher levels of education, but what it does say is that there are these certain niches, there are occupational niches that are really important to pay attention to. And as we know, not everyone does get a bachelor's degree, and not everyone does get go on beyond a bachelor's. So finding those niches, how did you phrase it, Mash? The focused participation in getting that focused participation in the important niches is kind of what you're looking to do. Yes.
I see you saying specific to young workers, so I suspect that there may be a trend where starting off, someone with a college degree is earning less than someone with a high school degree who's gone into a union job perhaps, but then possibly over a course of a lifetime that may change, and they may...
You know, that may be the case, and also young workers, meaning this is kind of a trend. This is relatively new, that there are these sort of places where with a license or certificate you are doing better than someone who might have a BA in something like, you know, history or something more not as aligned with the labor market. So you can look at it when you actually look through the PowerPoint, but the yellow part, you know, the yellow stuff up here, this is an IT program and adapted from an IT program in Kentucky that the Department of Education put together. So all of the things in so this over on the side is grade 9, 10, 11, 12, and then 13, 14 down at the bottom. In high school, 9, 10, 11, 12, the first 4 rows, you can see people taking English and math and science and art and history and the whole array of basic high school programs, as well as computer literacy programs and increasingly high level. There's a networking program, there's a security program. So at the 11th and 12th grade level, they are actually obtaining certificates that have meaning, CompTIA and other IT kinds of certificates that employers are looking for. So they can take that and get an entry-level job as a network associate or what have you. And again, that person, they may not forever after be a network associate, but it's great to have this to start out with. And and what we're seeing, what the data is showing, is that this basically is good for everyone. That it, you know, people who it really increases the rates of high school completion, which I know in Vermont you don't have a problem with, which is great. But it also increases the rates of post-secondary enrollment. There's another example here involving just one high school in Boston, and the same kind of thing with a variety of partners. In this case, the industry partner is SAP, an IT company, and the Boston PIC, which is the WIB, actually has some staff who go into the schools and they do the career exploration part of this job and work one-on-one with students. And the Boston Public Schools is part of this. This is the kind of backward mapping process that the educators go through to align what's happening in the classroom with what the employer needs. So The employer's role here, SAP's role, is to work very specifically to kind of analyze their jobs and provide information on what exact skills are needed in those jobs. The high schools, the college then, Bunker Hill Community College as part of this partnership, they then say, okay, well then for our associate's degree and certificate programs, what do we specifically need to be teaching so that people can get the jobs of the varying levels that SAP has given us? And then the Charlestown High School works from that and says, okay, given that those are the college requirements, what do we need to be doing in high school? And all of this is very well aligned, by the way, to allow for easy articulation so that people don't lose credits along the way. So this is that's a little bit of, sort of insider look into the kind of the work, the process of putting these together. So to your question of data, I have a little bit of data on what this all means. So some of these programs, there are programs called early college programs that it has sort of a specific meaning, but but in any case, in early college programs, everyone gets degrees credits toward college, and 90% of people in those kinds of high schools are likely to graduate versus 78% as the national average. So that's pretty good. They also are more likely to earn an associate's degree or a post-secondary credential while in high school. What this does is it saves a lot of money, is one part of it, for the student, if they can get that under their belt before even going on to the next step. And data shows that they are more likely to enter college than their peers, as I said before. So there are these are kind of the key elements that I've been talking about, sort of things that need to happen, who needs to be at the table. You need state leadership. You need or regional leadership or district leadership, whichever level you're working on. You need someone who's going to bring in the educators and the employers together and kind of play that role of bringing everyone to the table. You need employers who are engaged, who are saying, yes, I want to be at the table, I want to help with the work-based learning because I need employees and I like what you're doing to help develop them. And as I said, you need the counseling and the support to build students. This is a set of, I'm gonna stop and we're almost done with the slides. I'm gonna stop and not go through the rest of the slides because I think we've pretty much kind of you've gotten what you needed to get. But if you're thinking about going down this road, it's also important to think about what metrics you're going to use to demonstrate your success. These metrics might be different than what you are collecting now. So you want to be looking at things like how many people are graduating and how many people, which you obviously already are, how many people are choosing that particular program of study, how many people are finding a job, what is the wage. It takes a little bit of work to figure out how to get that data. But obviously it's an important part of doing this work if you choose to go the career pathway route. And I should say not so much in the future. It sounds like you have gone the career pathway route in many places. So this is some ideas to just help you flesh it out. Yes?
So we've been in a period of prolonged, slow economic growth, yet we continue to hear anecdotally from different employers about jobs that they can't fill. And I'm curious if Jobs for the Future has done any analysis of unfilled positions and what have been the impediments for getting people on that pathway?
Yes, we have. I mean, that is a common refrain from employers. And we have done, but it is it's a a deep dive into the local data, really. You know, the why is really different every place. The general why is there are, people argue that we've gotten rid of technical training programs we never should have gotten rid of, in this push in our attempt to avoid tracking, which was a good thing, tracking in a more traditional way, like, oh, you are who you are, so in 8th grade I'm going to decide that you should be this. That's not what this is. But in an effort to avoid that and to create opportunities and access to higher ed for all, we said higher ed for all, and it gave the notion that everyone should be going to college, and a lot of states got rid of a lot of vocational technical education. So that's part of what people point to, that there's. Are you shaking your head? You don't think that that's?
No, I think we do have things.
well maybe,
area, it's terrific.
okay, well good, that's excellent. So, yeah, I'm not, this is sort of generally speaking, there are, in a lot of places it has been really diminished, but I'm glad to hear that that's not the case here.
Well, I think we have established good technical education centers, but I think there are still impediments for students to get there. And we hear stories, this is from the past, but I'm sure there's still some of that out there. For example, there's one technical center attached to a high school where it's referred to as the walk of shame for the students that went over to the technical center.
Yeah.
And I think that there's still this general thing with guidance counselors that everyone needs to go and get their bachelor's degree.
Yep.
And I think that there's still those impediments out there that we have great centers, but I don't think they're being fully utilized.
Yeah, that's, I mean, well, the answer to your question, first let me say, is complex and complicated. Many different, you know, sort of historical factors. But what you said is definitely one thing that people point to, is the sort of the poor reputation that has come about, that, you know, it somehow was shameful to go into the trades or to work with your hands as opposed to going off to institution of higher education. But what we know about our economy is that, you know, we don't have an economy that needs exclusively, you know, workforce consultants or labor economists. We are teachers. We also need people who can build things. We need people who can fix things. We need people who can, you know, have a sense of physics, which I don't have. Which, in any case, you know what I'm saying. There's a whole wealth of jobs out there, and part of what the problem is that the people who have them are retiring. That's another part of the picture. That there is, you know, the demographics are changing. So you're absolutely right. Younger people are not going into those jobs. And also for a while, you know, there are people, I know that in some states they're doing a huge ad campaign around manufacturing, because students are told not to go into manufacturing because it's a dead-end job, and oh, by the way, you're going to get laid off, like I did, or like your grandparent did, probably did, you know, because manufacturing just, you know, was not a good, was not a good future. And that has really changed kind of how the way that what the job is has changed a lot, and also and requires more technical skills, and there is more opportunity for advancement, and also there are just more of them. We're starting to build things back home again, so anyway, it's part of it. There are definitely big marketing campaigns going on that let people know that those are good jobs to have. So I don't know. Did I answer your question? It's complicated, I guess, is what I could have said.
Well, I think it depends on the community, what kind of support there is, what your WIB is doing,
Yeah.
how engaged the employers are in your
Absolutely.
community, and what kind of hand up are they giving to protect them. Because I know from experience in the legislature that there are communities where it's a dead end, but there are communities who are really doing well.
Yeah.
And there should be some way that those people get more, I think.
Well, so there's a third component I didn't mention, which is that there's this misalignment between technical education and the current needs of the labor market. I mean, schools just aren't keeping up, you know, it's like skills are old. You can't keep training auto mechanics who don't know anything about computers when all your cars have computers in them. You know, it's that kind of thing. Yeah.
In your pathways work with states, what role or how robust are these states engaging parents in pathway education?
So I think it varies, and I have to say I started out saying I work more on the community college side of things,
Okay.
and I'm sort of know about, I don't work as intimately with the 9 to 12 grade levels, so I can't share specific examples with you, and I apologize for that.
Is that work JFF
Yeah.
advises on?
Yeah.
So, and what about on the community college level and parents? Is there any sort of an outreach effort that these states are engaging in parents, whether it's 9-12 or 9-16?
Well, you know, I'm very aware of parent outreach when it comes to what we were just talking about, sort of making people aware of the jobs of the future, and so to speak, you know, that there are, and that manufacturing, these various jobs have opportunities. There are opportunities for your children. You may not know anything about these jobs, but let me tell you about them. So yes, there is a lot of that work that goes on in terms of.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head on manufacturing, and I think a lot of that is parents
Yeah,
saying,
it is parents.
don't go there. And
Right.
you know, we are starting to hear more anecdotal stories about manufacturers saying, I can't find employees because they're worried about layoff, they're worried about economic stability, and in some cases, they'd rather stay on public assistance than seek the job with a manufacturer for that stability purpose. So it becomes, it's
Yeah.
becoming more acute, especially here in Vermont where we have such a low unemployment rate.
Well, so one thing I know manufacturers are doing, employers who are reaching out to the school system for help with this problem, or the WIBs or what have you, are saying, are going into the schools and speaking with not only students but also parents to give them up-to-date information. It's not the dead-end job where, you know, you come home smelling bad and with grease under your nails. I mean, you know, it's a clean factory, it's a clean room, and you need highly technical skills, et cetera, et cetera. Just updating people's understanding. So that is definitely a big role employers can play. Yeah.
So, I would say the vast majority of the things you put up there that are necessary for pathways to be successful in the state of Vermont are happening today.
Okay.
The vast majority of them. And the legislature has forced some things onto secondary education that are good. Act 77, so every student has to have a personal learning plan starting in 7th grade, and some schools are taking it all the way down, starting that in kindergarten. So they're starting to talk about things like that at a much younger age that requires parental participation to write. The educational quality standards have changed, not based on Carnegie units, but based on proficiency-based graduation standards. And teaching practices are changing in the classroom. Along with that, the guidance practices are changing so that it's not just to get into Dartmouth, Princeton, and Harvard. There are some kids that's going to happen, but the guidance process is changing also,
Right.
looking at pathways. Probably not as quickly as it should, but it's certainly starting to look at based on the 21st century skills, based on the, we do hear in education, employers say, you aren't giving us kids that are ready to come to work for us, and we're hearing from post-secondary, we're having to do too much remediation.
Yeah.
So there is work going on a pretty regular basis and pretty intensively across the state in secondary education, even down into the middle schools and high schools. I know I'm lucky enough to be in a pre-K to 12. I got them from 3 years old to 19 years old.
Huh.
It's an undoable job
Yeah.
these days of the world, but we're getting by. And focusing on that middle level and how do we change those teaching practices so we're starting to apply what we're learning to help with why do I have to do that? We're answering that more and more in the classroom.
Yeah.
So all those things are happening, but here's what's not happening.
Yeah.
The employers aren't beating my door down to come in and help me. They aren't beating my door down to come in and say, I want to come in and do a presentation. I want to offer a tour. I'll take 2 kids to do an internship. I have a work-based learning coordinator from 7th grade to 12th grade. We put kids out into the community doing job shadows. And most schools, because of the educational quality standards and the changes that have come out of the legislature that are good, are now having those. So all of those things are in place. It's just a matter of getting them to work. We need people to come and knock on our door and say, here's what I can do to help you.
Well, let me offer a suggestion and hear what other people have to say or what other thoughts people have on this topic. So no one is going to come and knock on your door, unfortunately. And yet, and you know, the flip of that is like, oh, you should knock on their door. Well, who has time? You're running a school for 3 to 19-year-olds. God love you. So, how does one handle that? So, some schools do allocate staff, or some school districts allocate staff to go out and, you know, reach out to employers and say, oh, we're looking for spaces for internships and work-based learning of this, that, and the other kind. However, then employers often say, too many people are knocking on my door, I can't hear from them. I mean, maybe this probably wouldn't happen in a more rural place, or happens less. But if you imagine in a city with many schools of different levels, and you know, the employers are like, I'm hearing from way too many people. So there's a couple things. One is in terms of the staffing, it does require some effort. It can't just be put on the back of someone who has a job at 120% time. So that's where some resources come in. That's where some state resources often come in, or a grant of some kind. And also, it works best if it is someone that convenes a group of employers and a group of educators, and not just, you know, one school, one employer, one school, one employer. But, so a WIB actually is a group of, you know, to the extent that you, do you have, regional WIB meetings or regional?
We're one state with.
One state WIB, all right. Well, so, and another kind of potential intermediary like that is like the chambers of commerce, or trade associations. You know, if there's a manufacturing trade association in a particular region, they could get to a variety of employers. That's one way people handle it.
Well, can I just
Yeah.
jump in? We have regional development corporations
Yeah.
that serve all regions of the state, and in most cases, they're deeply engaged in this conversation. And in your neck of the woods, I can name at least 2 employers who would love to have you knock on their door, and vice versa.
I love to have them knock on mine
Yeah,
too, so.
but yeah, it is a matter of figuring out how to make the time to go to the meeting or to make the phone call. And yeah, having the leadership understand that it's important and direct some resources there is critical.